Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the conversation series. I am thrilled today to have Mr. Kevin Campbell here with me. He is the executive director of the Raleigh Area Land Trust. And so we're going to get right into some very interesting topics about what's happening around in Raleigh and what he is doing and his group is doing to help affordable homeownership around Raleigh right now, which is massive because Raleigh is getting larger and larger and we're having more and more people move here. So Kevin, thank you so much for joining me
Thank
today.
you. It's great to be here with you.
Yeah, I
Yay.
am. I first just want to get into how long have you been in Raleigh? How long have you been in North Carolina? Were you born and raised?
No, I've been in Raleigh and North Carolina for
Okay.
20 years, just
Okay.
about exactly 20 years. We moved here in 2004, and
Okay.
my work at the time with Habitat for Humanity had
Okay.
taken us around to different places, but we landed here for a few years, we thought, and now it's been 20, and it's been great.
It's funny how people say that all the time. They're like, we were only supposed to be here for a few years, and like they were like, we've never left.
Yeah.
We have never vacated the premises. I want to just jump right into your background. And first, you've been committed to affordable homeownership since 1988.
Yes.
What first sparked your initial interest in this cause? You worked with Habitat for Humanity. What kind of got you into this world?
Yeah, it's a good story. And thank you for saying affordable home ownership. I'm
Yeah.
particularly housing is important, whether
Yes.
it's rental or home ownership. But to me, home ownership really just sets a family on a new course for
Absolutely.
generations to come. So excited about the home ownership part.
Very cool.
But I was working in the late 80s in Lynchburg, Virginia,
Okay.
actually with an organization, it was kind of a coalition of faith communities supporting people in need. And what we just had people coming in and they wanted help with their electric bill, they wanted help with food, they wanted help with their rent. And I remember, especially with rent, and this is the late 80s, but I remember people's rent being $40 a month.
Wow.
And then I remember visiting those houses, and they were just these wooden shacks like I had never really experienced before. But it was what they could afford.
Yep.
And also, then we also had a program that was delivered. These homes were often heated by firewood only,
Okay.
no central heating systems by firewood. So we would actually take firewood. So that was my experience seeing this
Yeah.
really substandard housing, below code housing that people were living in that city. And I remember thinking as we were delivering firewood, wouldn't it be nice to improve the housing to a point where
Yep.
this firewood delivery wasn't needed?
Yeah.
And so that with the coalition of faith communities, we were just in a place to bring people together. And I remember we thought we would look at, I think it was 4 different housing models.
Okay.
And the first one turned out to be Habitat for Humanity, which is relatively new on the national scene at that time. And the response was so positive. We didn't look at the other 3 models. Everybody
That's
was like
fantastic.
ready to go.
Yeah.
So that community had a very visible and deep need for not just affordable housing, but actually uh, standard housing,
Yeah.
not below code. And it just took off. It was the right thing at the right time. So, and that's a relatively small city. We became one of the largest habitats in the country
Okay.
within a few years. And this can be a long story, but
That's
it
good.
took me on to getting an offer to work with Habitat International at the headquarters in Georgia after
Okay.
that.
Very cool. And then you worked in Puerto Rico. Where was it? In Puerto Rico?
Puerto Rico.
Very
Yeah,
beautiful.
that was so then, yeah, I worked for Habitat International,
Yeah.
some of that time at the headquarters in Georgia, and then some of that time based here in Raleigh
Raleigh.
out of a regional office.
Okay.
And then I led Habitat for Humanity of Wake County from 2010 to 2019.
Yeah.
And then I really wasn't on my radar, but Habitat asked if I would go to lead the hurricane recovery efforts after Hurricane Maria in Puerto
Okay.
Rico. So I went there early 2020 and just came back to Raleigh this January.
Very cool.
And it was a great experience.
Yeah.
And, we repaired 820 homes
Yeah.
after the hurricane for families that own them that had experienced damage from that hurricane.
I love that. I love that you were able to help so much there. And I love these stories because I think, we see all the commercials on TV sometimes after a national disaster happens, but it's nice to be able to hear like, hey, these things are actually happening. These efforts are actually being made. Uh,
Often, yeah, I think often that the news leaves that story after a
Yeah,
few weeks, even when it's a severe situation.
absolutely.
And the recovery, we set out with a large grant with Habitat in Puerto Rico and said
Okay.
this would be a 5-year program. So we were excited to be able to spend those funds well and wrap that up this past December.
Beautiful, beautiful. You had a quote about not caring who gets the credit, but you want it to reflect a selfless approach to leadership. How has that mindset shaped your work and the culture of the organizations you've led with Habitat for Humanity and now with Raleigh Land Trust?
Yeah, that was an early quote.
Yeah.
And unattributed, which fits the quote itself. So I don't know who to attribute it to, but there's no end to what can be accomplished if it doesn't matter who gets the credit. And I
Yeah.
think that speaks to when you have problems like housing, and it's not like we don't know what to do.
Yeah.
We do know what to do, and it's about bringing people together and inviting everyone in. So I remember back in Lynchburg when we started Habitat for Humanity, that was really our goal is like we should find a way for everyone to be able to be involved, whether in Habitat's model, volunteers come out to build the houses. Some people are intimidated because
Yeah.
they think, I don't know how to build a house. I
Yeah.
was in that group
Yeah.
at the beginning, and then I learned over the years that when you break down the construction of a house into small parts, everybody can contribute. But people can give financially. People can be advocates. That's
Yep.
an important thing. Addressing systemic issues for housing. So I can't claim that we did engage every single
Yeah.
person in Lynchburg, but it definitely had a lot of energy for that community and very well known. And
Love it.
in my time there, we built 100, I still remember the number,
Wow.
154 homes.
Wow.
And I just talked to somebody this week that now they have 300, I think 315 homes,
That's
and
fantastic.
still that organization's still going on addressing the need.
That's fantastic. I do want to hit on your transition from for Humanity to now working with Raleigh Area Land Trust and how you became to be in the position that you are in. How'd you become to be executive director of that?
Yeah, that's interesting. So when I was at leading Habitat Wake County, and Rhett Fussell, he was the individual here in Raleigh who had another full-time job, but just had interest in housing and came to learn of the community land trust model, which I'm
Okay.
sure we'll talk some more
Yeah.
about. But he just started socializing it around the community, and he reached out to me at Habitat, and I had known of the model
Okay.
in a small way, and I was impressed. Rhett brought some consultants here
Okay.
from Burlington, Vermont. That's the largest community land trust in the country.
Okay.
And, shared the model of permanently affordable housing,
Okay.
not just affordable to the first buyer, but affordable over generations.
Yeah.
And we were at Habitat experiencing whole neighborhoods becoming unaffordable so quickly. And that could be just east of downtown Raleigh.
Yep.
I think Cary fit that category. That we saw these pockets where we were building that even with our affordable mortgages and Habitat, even the property taxes were starting to make it difficult for people to stay in their
Yeah.
homes and how to address that. So I was eager, and that's before being whisked off to Puerto Rico, in seeing how Habitat for Humanity and Raleigh could work with Raleigh Area Land Trust. That was the
Yeah.
start. And then the organization formed, had a board of directors, and they asked me to join the board in 2019,
Okay.
like 2 months before I left for Puerto Rico. And so, then everything became remote anyway.
Yeah.
So I served on the board through the time that I was in Puerto Rico, helping the organization
Okay.
get established. And then as a board, we decided about a year ago that we finally financially could make a commitment to an executive director and
Okay.
start to grow in that way. And the board started looking at how are we going to find this executive director. I had really intended, I thought that I would just come back to Raleigh and take a remote position with Habitat International. But I kept thinking about it, and I just remembered how much I really loved local work and
Yeah.
how it's really full circle back to the late 80s for me, starting up something new.
Yeah.
I thought, well, that's an interesting challenge to jump back into. So
Absolutely.
I mentioned to the other board members that I would be interested, and apparently they were excited about that. And So I did as soon as I had 1 week back from Puerto Rico, 1 week, and then I jumped in
Jumped right back
as the
in.
first staff member.
Very cool. Very cool. And you talked about the model. What does that model look like when it comes to Raleigh? You talked about, up in Virginia, but what does it look like here in Raleigh?
Yeah, so Community Land Trust, I guess, is the technical name, and it's
Okay.
really a movement that started over 50 years ago. And the idea is permanently affordable housing,
Okay.
home ownership, we like to say. And we do that by the model is that the nonprofit organization, the land trust itself, our case, Raleigh Area Land Trust,
Yeah.
retains ownership of the land forever.
Okay.
And we sell the house on the land. So
Okay.
that does two things. One, if you're only buying the house and not the land, it's cheaper. So that opens up this home ownership idea for a lot more people. So that's exciting. Um, People at lower incomes can afford that. It also in North Carolina enables, and this makes logical sense, the homeowner only pays taxes on the building and not the
Okay.
land. It often cuts their tax bill in half, which is a major thing.
Major.
And then we share equity. So that's important.
Okay.
So we're really trying to be in the middle of preserving affordability on one end of the spectrum
Yeah.
to building equity on the other and kind of meeting in the middle. So we are at Raleigh Area Land Trust, we're offering our homeowners 1.5% equity per year that they live in the house. So
Okay.
say if they're there for 10 years, they'll have 15% equity. They also, they have often received what we call down payment assistance, could be from the city or the state to help them buy the house. That gets forgiven after some time.
Okay.
So that's another equity component. We also like to say that savings and taxes can be another equity
Yep.
component. So we actually showed some numbers to Wake County recently where in an example, after 10 years, where a family could actually have equity. Oh, and then the big thing, they have equity by paying the principal of their
Okay.
mortgage,
Okay.
and that they could actually have about $100,000 equity after 10 years,
Wow.
and which enables them then to have choices. Do they want to leave that house and buy a market rate house, or they could choose to stay there, but they have, resources to leave to their kids. And,
Okay.
over the years, the thing I hear the most when we're talking with people that are interested in a Habitat house or a Raleigh Area Land Trust house, they'll say, what is this going to cost me monthly? That's their
Right.
main thing. Can I afford this each month? And then the second thing right behind it is, can I leave this to my kids? And the lease is, we have a land lease that's transferable
Okay.
within the family. So that lease there can be transferred to the family. They'd still have to meet the terms of the lease so that
Yeah.
unit stays affordable. But really bringing a new model and
Okay.
a new, really, we always say tool in the tool belt to affordable housing to Raleigh and Wake County.
Okay.
We've had in this area of North Carolina, we've had really successful community land trusts
Okay.
in Chapel Hill and Durham for over 20 years, but not in Raleigh. And now's the time.
Yeah.
If there was ever a time with the
Absolutely.
stress of affordability right now, now's the time.
Yes. I like what you said about the living the month to month because I think it's the way interest rates have been going, the way the real estate has been going. Like it is just even somebody who is working a full-time job, who is trying to just make it day to day, like it is hard to pay your monthly bills right now just because of how expensive everything
Yeah, and I
is.
think, it was already in this area trending that way. And
Yeah,
then COVID, it just like added like rocket fuel
absolutely.
to it. And, I think rents are up in the last 5 years,
Yeah.
40% in Raleigh. Incomes might be up 10%.
Yeah.
So that doesn't work very long. And people are having to make those choices. Obviously, the house where you live is really a foundation for your whole life.
Yep.
So you need that and you need to make that payment. But people then finding trouble getting,
Yeah.
adequate medical care,
Yes.
taking care of education, even food, things like that.
Yeah, yeah, it's I was actually just listening to something the other day. They had gone and looked at a receipt of a grocery bill that they had, and they went and looked at how much it would be today, and it was astronomical how much 10 items was 5 years ago compared
Just
to what
five
it is
years. Yeah.
today. Like it's crazy because even if you go and just buy the simplest 10 items from the grocery store, it is it's $50 at
Yeah.
least, and it's ridiculous
Yeah.
sometimes how much things are costing everybody just to be able to live.
Yeah. And I think and we're talking about, we base our model on area median income,
Okay.
and we want we make sure our homes are affordable for people at the 80% of area median income and below.
Okay.
Well, for Raleigh, it's just astounding. Like, I was away for
Yeah.
4 years in Puerto Rico. The area median income, 100% is $120,000.
Wow.
So 80% is $100,000.
Yeah.
So we're trying even to make housing affordable for families that are at $100,000 and below,
Okay.
so that their mortgage is only 30% of their income. And there's just so many families. I think it's 1 in 4 families in Wake County, their housing costs exceed 30% of their income,
Wow.
which has been recognized for a lot of years at the national level as the marker for affordability, that
Okay.
families really shouldn't be paying more than 30%
Yeah.
of their income in housing, but so many do.
Now, we've just really been talking about some of the biggest challenges kind of that we have right here in Raleigh and just how much and how expensive things are. But what are some of the biggest opportunities that there are with this Raleigh Area Land Trust to help people and really like what are you guys working towards this year and years to come?
Yeah, and I think the opportunity, it's kind of a spin-off of the situation, is
Yeah.
since the situation has become so dire, people are aware of it. So what I've found in coming back into Raleigh Area Land Trust is that the local governments, really all of them, and I mentioned earlier, we saw some pockets that were really stressed for affordability
Yep.
5 or 6 years ago, downtown Raleigh, Cary. It's really now the whole county.
Yeah.
And so previously, municipalities that were seen to be affordable places, and I would say like Nightdale, Rolesville. I've talked with their planning staff in both of them, and they've developed affordable housing plans
Wow.
in all those communities. How can they address it?
Yeah.
So we're seeing more public investment.
Okay.
I think easily we could see a lot more
Yeah.
of it, but we're seeing local resources being dedicated to affordable housing, not just passing through federal resources,
Okay.
which used to be the way. So that's an opportunity. But at Raleigh Area Land Trust, we are excited always. Our first 2 homes we sold last year,
Very cool.
2023, in Southeast Raleigh, and those two, it's really two individuals that have lived and worked and
Yeah.
contributed to the community for their whole lives, and they are actually able to buy a house. I think both of them never really thought that was going to be possible. But not only are they buying a house, but they're actually buying it in the neighborhood that they grew up in.
Very cool.
So they've returned to that community. And I think they're both just so gracious and grateful for the opportunity to be the first 2 home buyers of Raleigh Area Land Trust and be where they are.
Very cool.
So we have that. Our board of directors, a year or so ago, set a goal of having 100 homes in the land trust in 5 years. So it's funny to say, but we're 1 year in and we
Yeah.
have 98 to go,
Yeah.
but we do have some things in process.
Very cool.
So we have an 18-unit project
Oh, wow.
that we've been awarded by the city of Raleigh that we are getting close to getting started, called
Okay.
Cottages of Idlewild, just east of downtown.
Okay.
That'll be 18 cottage court units. 14 of those will be for homeownership and 4 rentals.
Okay.
Is something the community wanted to see at, even lower incomes. So we have that. Those units will be finished in 2025, I
Very
hope.
cool.
We were just awarded a nice grant of subsidy from the town of Cary. And there we will purchase 4 homes
Okay.
scattered in the town. And the town's funds will help subsidize it so that lower income range can
Okay.
afford that. So we have those 22 units. And then just recently, something I'm really excited for is that I think the local governments have really put out the message to developers and home builders that when those developers or home builders come before the town seeking a rezoning or something, that the town really expecting to see affordable components in the plan.
Okay.
In North Carolina, it's not legal to require it, and not the government can't say we are requiring you to do this, but they're saying, we really want to see you give some consideration to that.
Okay.
And so just really in the past month, we've had 2 uh, home builders come to us asking how they could include
That's
properties that
fantastic.
they would sell to the Raleigh Area Land Trust at the affordable price that we can just turn around and sell it to one of
Okay.
our buyers. So I'm thinking that that will be really speed up our work. So
Yes.
I have encouragement that we can reach the 100 houses in by 2027.
Very cool. I love that there are so many different initiatives and ways that you guys are doing this as well, from the cottages to work and carry to all these developers coming to you guys. I think there's so much opportunity there in so many different ways that you can do it as well. So I love hearing that.
Yeah, I always have felt, even over all these years for me doing affordable housing, is that I always felt like if the opportunities dried up, it would be really tough to hang in there. But they've
Yes.
always come,
Yeah.
and now for me, 36 years. And, I've had an opportunity to, in Virginia, here, also around the country, in my different roles with Habitat, be a part of 2,600 homes, over
Wow.
that time. And it's just amazing the creativity and the partnerships that have had to come
Yeah.
together to make this happen. It's been a fun ride.
It's very much how we think of startups and bootstrapping. It's very, you're having to think on your feet. It's clever. You're pulling a bunch of different ways out of a hat to try to figure out how to solve a very big problem
I've
in a very
always
different
liked the
way.
challenge, with Habitat and now with the land trust model. There are national networks of those groups. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of learning within the network, and the networks have always been very friendly to share. So I've always really loved the challenge of hearing about the way things are
Yeah.
being done in other communities and then like contextualizing it locally and
Love
making
it.
it work locally.
I love that. I love bringing things locally. Um, I want to get into, we're getting ready to hit National Charity Day.
Mm.
And what does that mean, and what role does the community play in helping what you guys are trying to do right now?
Yeah, I talked earlier about the government support, which is
Yeah.
critical, but the private sector support, whether it's corporate, institutional, or
Yeah.
individuals, is critical. And we've had great success in the Cottages of Idlewild project. I think we've
Yeah.
we've raised about $1 million from private
Wow.
sources in that. Um, we have an operational budget. We're trying to keep and be a lean organization
Yep.
on into the future on purpose. So we expect to have limited staff. We do expect to add a program director in addition to me and
Okay.
a administrative support. But then just working with partners to get our projects done. So we have an operational budget of about $500,000 on an
Okay.
annual basis. And we've had some individuals and some corporations. Banks are especially good partners
Yeah.
because they work in the mortgage space
Yeah.
and they have capital, but they also have federal requirements to demonstrate how they're supporting the
Yeah.
community and those in need. So they've been good partners, but we're really looking forward this fall to really launching a campaign too. I always call it, and I'm going to get political here, but I
Mhm.
call it Obama style fundraising
Okay.
because the Obama campaign in 2008 really launched this, where you had
Yeah.
just hundreds of thousands of small donors. And
Yeah.
what I love about that is it lets everybody to feel like they own the project,
Yeah.
not just a few people funding it. Also, if a $25 donor decides this year they can't participate, it's not the same as a 100,000 donor deciding
Right.
they can't participate. So it kind of spreads your risk out. But
Okay.
I think the real thing is just engaging the community in that way. So right now we're upgrading our website, trying to be fresh with all the technology to help people give, in that way. So that'll be coming forward here soon.
Love that.
But as of right now, no one needs to wait. As of right now, our website is live and you
Okay.
can give through our website at ralt.org.
Okay. Okay. Now, we have talked about federal, we've talked about the private sector. What are some, outside of donating money for people that are local, are there other things that people can do locally to help with what you guys are doing? Is there anything the community can do that you want to just let people know about?
We are trying to, and I think with this 18 house project in Idlewild neighborhood, we are not designed to be a volunteer building
Okay.
organization. I mean, Habitat does that well, and it's super important, I think, to actually have people touch the projects.
Yeah.
So we're not designed that way, but I think as that project nears completion, we could be organizing some volunteers. So if anybody's interested in that, please let us know. To like at the end of the project to do landscaping or do painting, something like that. So I think that will come along. In addition to just making a donation that we love. Also, affordable housing is so expensive and it just takes a lot of capital. So recently we've had an individual come to us from another media story that we did.
Okay.
And she said, I have $750,000 that I would like for you all to just be able to use and kind of recycle it. So we could use her capital and buy a home, upfit it a little bit, and then sell it, and then use the money over and over again. So she has seen that in her work of buying and selling homes, the need for that. And these days, when the housing market's so tight, if you're not a cash buyer, you're at a disadvantage. So her funds are going to give us the ability, and we're going to deploy them, I think, first in Cary, where we'll use her funds we can actually be a cash buyer. So we could be, make a good offer to the seller. And then when we'll go to sell the house, the town of Cary funds will come in as a subsidy, and the home buyer's mortgage will come in, and we'll receive that capital back and then go buy the next house with it. So
that's fantastic.
That's another way, to give and bring down the cost of loans that otherwise we'd have to go out and get.
I love that. So hopping into this is much, we've talked about this has been in Durham for 20 years. This has been in Chapel Hill and other parts of North Carolina for many years. And Raleigh now has got this going on. As we see this become more popular, you've worked with Habitat for Humanity and you've seen this happen in different parts of the country. How easy is this to replicate in Virginia and South Carolina, Georgia, and other places that need this just as much as we do?
Yeah, I think it is. And there is a national network of community land trusts, and it's supported by an organization called the Grounded Solutions Network.
Okay.
So they help us learn from each other and support best practices and so forth. But there are over 300 community land trusts around the country. I think now there are 10 in North Carolina.
Wow.
Most are new like us, other than Chapel Hill and Durham.
Yep.
And we're seeing a lot of growth. So a lot of land trusts are coming online. And I think it's the situation that's causing that, where models like Habitat for Humanity have been very effective. But like I said earlier, after a few years, if that family sells the house, it's like, hooray for them. They just got a lot of equity, but now that house in that neighborhood is no longer affordable.
Yep.
So with the current conditions, people are seeing the real advantage of the land trust model. And it's not particularly, it's different because you're buying just the house and not the land. That's not your typical real estate transaction. It's different, but it's not so complicated. But it does take a lot of resources.
Yeah.
So that's, and that work of building the brand, Habitat for Humanity has one of the top nonprofit brands in the world.
Yep.
And I definitely, doing Habitat's work locally, benefited from that brand.
Yeah.
And we're here, slowly building that brand and getting the word out. So I'm eager, though. The model is just so right for the time that I think will take off.
Now, when we think of something like Raleigh compared to Seattle or Los Angeles, where you have these bigger cities, how do those models have to differ in order to help support something that is like a true city compared to us, where we do have a little bit of city and suburban life mixed together?
I think it's just probably the level of subsidy.
Okay.
That, you get. We look at two things. What's the median home price in a community, and what's the median income? And some places, I think Los Angeles is like the worst, where median home prices are super high.
Yep.
Believe it or not, median income in Los Angeles is lower than Raleigh.
Wow.
And so they have that kind of disconnect. So ours are closer, but we're starting to see that gap here.
Yep.
So I think we still have opportunity here.
Yeah.
When you get in our local area, a little further out from the triangle itself, so say like Johnston County or Sanford or Harnett County, things like that, you still have a real opportunity to get in early with the land trust and really preserve affordability with much less subsidy.
Okay.
So I think that's important. And, thinking what it really is, overall, the whole country
Yeah.
is really a lack of supply of housing.
Okay.
So that really dropped off precipitously in 2008. There was a recession then,
Yep.
a huge recession impacted housing. There was a lot of foreclosure in the market, and the levels of housing production for our population growth had never come back to that level. It had started to come back, and then supply chain issues with COVID set it back again.
Yep.
Now you're having interest rate hold it back again. I was just at a conference that the city of Raleigh had a couple of weeks ago. The speaker was from the University of Washington, so his local area is Seattle. Can't remember his name. Sorry about that. But he has studied, homelessness, and his message to us here in Raleigh was, thank goodness you're not where Seattle is. You're not where Portland is, San Francisco, Los Angeles. Yep. And he said the issue is so big in those communities. And he was talking about having a conversation with the mayor of Los Angeles. And the mayor of Los Angeles was, so excited that they had approved $1 billion in funding to address homelessness as like an unheard of number.
Yeah.
But was disappointed that homelessness hadn't ended.
Yeah.
And his comment was, well, you just put $1 billion toward a $50 billion problem. But maybe in Raleigh, we know we don't have a $50 billion problem, but we need more housing. And one thing that the speaker shared was a great analogy for me, a simple analogy that he was making the point of musical chairs. We all know about musical chairs. Yes. And he said his example was you have 10 people and you have 10 chairs. And then the music starts, and somebody comes and takes away one chair. Yeah. And then the music stops. And in his example, the person who had an injury or had their foot in a boot was the one who didn't get the chair. Yeah. They were left out. But his point was the reason he didn't have a chair was because there weren't enough chairs. Yep. Not because he had a boot on his ankle. Yeah. That given that you don't have enough houses, in our example, means the people that are going to be struggling with maybe employment or health or income, all those things, means they're the ones that are homeless. And what I loved is he turned that around and he said, if you really believe that the problem was his foot, then that's kind of the end of your responsibility. Yep. But if you believe that the problem is there are not enough chairs, then that's a community's responsibility to respond to. It's a structural problem to deal with. And it's nice to see, governments grappling with that supply issue. You've seen a lot of zoning change here locally and around the country, where single family housing has really limited the supply of housing. So we're excited, like at the Idlewild project, we're bringing in a design model called cottage courts. Okay. So we're putting 18 units on 1.2 acres. Okay. Rather than a couple units. Yeah. And we have, the zoning is now supportive of that in Raleigh, where it wouldn't have been a few years ago. Okay. So there are just a lot of structural challenges out there that it's nice to see they're starting to be addressed.
Very nice. I always I've spent quite a bit of time in Seattle, so I've been witness to quite a bit of some of the issues that they do have out there, and I'm so glad you got to hear from the gentleman from Washington State, because I think once COVID hit, which is like you had said earlier, like a bunch of different problems, just the water faucet just turned on high.
Well, and he talked about, Amazon, great success, but it's put a lot of pressure on the housing in Seattle. Yes. And now Amazon's stepping up with some big investments, as they should, and that's being celebrated. Yeah. So that's good to see.
Yeah, and it's, you hate to hear it be called that, but I hear it be called like tent city, but they do. I mean, it is just everywhere as you're driving around Seattle, you're just seeing it everywhere. And there are certain streets you just now cannot walk down in Seattle just because of how bad the situation is.
Yeah, I haven't been there recently, but he was describing exactly that.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking to see. I had been there beforehand, and then to see it after COVID had happened, it's just heartbreaking to see everything that's happened in that city, because it's a fantastic city to be in.
And you've seen it. It was a small city, maybe in Oregon. I think it is Grants Pass, Oregon. They just
Okay.
had a case go to the Supreme Court. And unfortunately, the Supreme Court just upheld that it's legal for cities to clear out homeless camps.
Okay.
So there was that kind of another legal thing that people were challenging, to not just clear out. Nobody's feels satisfied with people living in these tent camps,
Yeah.
but at least that was something. But now the Supreme Court has kind of paved the way for municipalities to remove those camps
Yeah.
and just displace people without having other plans.
It's heartbreaking. I think we saw it a few years ago too. Like homeless people were literally being put on buses and bussed out of cities and being made other people's problems. I'm like, that just doesn't help anybody. It just makes it worse around the country.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a systemic problem and
Yeah.
not solved by
Not
just
solved
moving
that
people
way.
around. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. What continues to drive your passion for everything that you do with Raleigh Area Land Trust, what you've done with Habitat for Humanity for years? What drives your passion for all of this?
Well, I think, it's a model. I always like to use the phrase of like extending the margin. Or the market, really extending the market.
Yeah.
So you have a market for home ownership. And when the market works, that's when you can provide solutions at scale. But now the market's working for less and less people. So then I think organizations like Habitat, Raleigh Area Land Trust, you know, design ourselves to how can we extend the margins of that? So how can we make that market work at a lower income level, and it can work with subsidies and so forth. So I like I love the challenge of that. And then it's really the people, and I mentioned our two home buyers here in Raleigh for Raleigh Area Land Trust, our first two, Mr. Watson and Demisha,
Yeah.
and just how much they appreciate. I think a lot of times in our world, because we are in a wealthy country, we're in
Yes.
a wealthy part of that country, we're seeing lots of wealth being generated, and people take for granted or even uh, don't think about it really how blessed they are. And it's that connection with those people like Mr. Watson and
Yeah.
Demisha who really bring you back to that. And it's so important to be brought back to that because it's true.
Yes.
That basic, 3-bedroom, 1-bath house is really all that they need. And they're so thrilled by that. It just, that gives me a lot of energy.
Yeah. You have been able to see with your own very eyes, um, natural disasters happen. Up in Lynchburg, you got to see conditions where they were with the $40 rent in the shacks. What can you describe the power of a community of people or people just in general coming together and saying, how can we help people? How can we make a difference in people's lives? What is the power you've been
And
able to see there?
that's something too. I was thinking yesterday about, I've had a ability, this is with Habitat, to travel around the world with groups and do some house building. So I've been in Latin America a lot, but also in Africa and Asia too. And I was thinking about being in Malawi. That's one of the 10 poorest countries in the world in Africa. And I've been there 3 times. And a story I remember there, and you talk about how people can come together and help each other. Well, we went on one trip, we were building in a village there, 2 homes in that week that we were there. But they took us to see a house that had been built the previous year. So the woman that was living there was expressing, what the house meant to her, and believe me, in Africa, this is a 1-room house, but it's sturdy. It's made out of blocks and it has a metal roof on it.
Yep.
And also the model there is, because African culture is so village based, it's so communal. We could learn a lot from that because we're not that here.
Yes.
And that communal way, well, the community came together, the tribal leaders in the community came together, and they tell Habitat, here is the person who has the most need. That's who needs this house. And so she received that, but they actually referred to the house in their language, but translated as the metal roof house, because all the other roofs were thatched out of palm and whatever. And she said that she knew that when she got the metal roof house, she had to invite everyone in. And it maybe is only 300 or 400 square feet. But when it rained hard, she knew it was her responsibility to invite everybody in
Yeah.
because her house was going to be able to withstand that rain, and there were going to start leaking.
Yep.
So even that really challenges us because sometimes we think about people that have or people that have excess
Yep.
can give. And I think it's really cool when you empower people that traditionally aren't seen that way,
Yeah.
but how generous they really are.
Yep.
Because and I would say it's because they know the need. I mean,
Yep.
they really feel it
Yep.
more than a lot of folks do. So that's been a cool thing of a lot of experiences I've had.
It's a very full circle kind of thing that you're
Yeah.
seeing, especially with that example of the giving back that you and the organizations you've been with have been able to do, but also at the same time, the people that you have helped are then saying, all right, I'm going to do the same with my community to make sure that I'm
And
that for
that's one
them.
of the deficits of poverty, we know about, when you can't have food or
Yep.
decent housing. But another thing is that you don't have the resources to be generous, and how important that is to a human being to just be naturally generous. So
Yes.
this model helps open that up, and
Yeah.
people are, I remember being I think it was in Guatemala, and the family, we were helping them build their new house, but we were in their old house that had a dirt floor, and their work that they earned a little income from was like plucking chickens. They were at that
Wow.
stage of the chicken process of taking the feathers out,
Yep.
and they just lavishly provided a meal for us that is beyond what they would ever do for themselves. But it was so important to give that, and I've kind of learned how you naturally want to say, no, no, no.
Yeah.
You need that for yourself. But how important it is to say yes
Yeah.
and let them give to you, because
Yeah.
it's such a natural human thing.
Absolutely.
Kevin, I can't thank you enough for sitting down with me today and sharing more about what you've been doing for the last 30, 40 years
Yeah,
and
thank
then
you.
what you're continuing to do here in Raleigh. So I so appreciate it.
Thank you for this. I always love the back and forth conversation. You've been
Yeah.
a great host. So thank
Thank
you
you.
for
I
that.
appreciate it. I appreciate it so much. You guys, I'm going to have all of Raleigh Area Land Trust, all their information down below so you guys can go check them out, donate money, do whatever you can to help the community. But as always, I will see you guys back here next time. Bye, y'all.